Well, hello, everyone. This is Sandra Ponce de Leon. I am a co-founder of More Women in Crypto and also the creator of NFT Boutique in Tulum. And we have been holding weekly More Women in Crypto sessions. We've been trying to hold them in the metaverse and, just getting a little bit frustrated because we're still early in these technologies and sometimes they don't always work for us. But we still have really great conversations and guests that we want to have conversations with, like Paige Donner here, who's with me from Frontier DAO. And we're just going to talk a little bit about what she's up to and what Frontier DAO is all about. So Paige, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hey, Sandra, really good to be with you here today. Thank you so much for having me on your show and inviting me to your NFT boutique. I loved it. I jumped in there, and as we were bantering just a little bit before we hit record, and it was just a question of my computer. It's just my processing unit isn't powerful enough. But what you're building there is wonderful.
Thank
So kudos
you.
to you. Keep with the vision. Things will get. You're so right to say we're early here, and it is really fun actually to meet in a metaverse experience. It makes you feel like you're in a shared space together, and
I
yeah.
know,
So
I
keep
know.
with
I
your
think we're I
vision.
think we're like just all, I mean, even but Zooms are nice too. And I was actually having a conversation with someone recently about how their business has changed and they really had only been doing, calls, for sales calls. Like, and so, but with Zoom, that really also changed everything because now we actually see what people look like on the other end. So Zoom is just as great. So yeah, happy to have you. And would love to just, well, I know you're, first of all, I know you're in Paris, so I'm just curious as to how you wound up in Paris. From your accent, it sounds like you're from the USA, but I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, love Zoom. This is great. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm having a virtual coffee with you, so very nice, really nice. Yeah, yeah, and it's great. I mean, so you're in Mexico and I'm in Paris, and here we are meeting and talking. Um, yeah, so I've been here for a dozen years this time around. I came initially for amour, so
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
I was married to a Frenchman, and I'm we're no longer married, but all good, and but that's it's funny because that is kind of when you ask people expats here in Paris who have ended up making a life here, 90% of the responses are is that they came for a spouse.
Ah,
So
love in Paris. Wow. It must have been quite a romantic journey. And but you're still there. So that's great. You I guess Paris has some staying power with you.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I made it stick. I think a lot of times people say if you sort of get past like about the 5 year mark, like like if you get past the first year, and then if you get past the 5 year mark, then you're kind of here, and you get so used to the wine and the cheese, and who wants to go anywhere?
Yes. Okay. Now I have to plan a visit soon.
Oh yeah, please do, please do. I'll show you all around the city. Yeah.
Amazing.
That'd be great. Yeah, bring your spouse, your kids, or whoever. So yeah, yeah. But I'm kind of a little bit jealous of you being in Mexico because I dream of being like near the beach, and I see photos that you post about your lovely community, and I'm like thinking to myself, oh, that is the life. So yeah.
Yes, yes. Well, everything you see on social is, what we want you to see, as we all know. But yeah, no, it's been an adventure, and I definitely am very thankful for the community here that's made, all the difference. It's such a thriving hub for crypto and Web3. And yeah, the More Women in Crypto group has been, all of those women are now my best friends here. So it's really great and heartwarming. So yeah, I am very thankful. And I
Yeah,
don't live that far from the beach. So yeah, I can ride my bike there later.
oh, nice, nice. Yeah,
Uh, so tell us about Frontier DAO.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, with great pleasure. So it was sort of when we stood this up a year ago, a little bit over a year ago now, it was sort of with a bit of are we really going to do this kind of a thing? And it was basically taking science and the recognition that certain certain trajectories of science can be thwarted or maybe even stunted, just because of the lack of funding, or you know, lack of streamlined funding. And so I approached a couple of scientists and I said, you know, look, what if we kind of turn this on its head and kind of use this model that a lot of the people in Web3 are using to do initial fundraisers, which is like basically, you know, sell, you know, NFT collections. And, you know, and then we started talking, and then we were like, well, you know, NFTs don't have to just be images. They could also be mathematical equations. They could be intellectual property. They could be all kinds of things. And so that then just got us really thinking out of the box. And so, you know, after kind of looking at each other and going, everyone's going to say that we're crazy, but what the heck, let's do it anyway. And so we did. So we founded Frontier DAO back in like late August, September-ish, and then deployed the DAO, and you know, figured out how to negotiate gas fees on MetaMask and mint on OpenSea, and just, you know, like, you know, all of it. It was for for a lot of the team, it was a big, you know, it was a big learning curve, um, because actually, so the co-founder is actually a nuclear physicist. He has a government job though, so he actually had to disassociate himself from the DAO back in January, just because of all the vagueness about crypto. And
Mm,
there couldn't he couldn't risk, because he's kind of close to retirement, he couldn't risk there being any kind of conflict of interest, say. So he took the safe route and kind of and disassociated from anything to do with crypto, actually. And now that things are now that regulation, now that the U.S. government is getting a little bit more precise on regulation, um, you know, things there's more clarity. Um, but yeah, that so I've been sort of carrying on, you know, a little bit, and it wasn't until so I remember, like, back in December, well, I was drafting it in November, but I drafted this article called "Why Science, Why Blockchain, Why a DAO Now,"
mm,
and because at that point there was we had only come across uh, two other science DAOs, but both were under the umbrella of Molecule. So they were kind of sister or brother, you know, sister and brother DAOs, kind of. So Vita DAO and Lab DAO. And so we were really the only ones that were kind of looking at space and fusion and climate technologies, right? So we really felt like we were sort of out flapping in the wind, kind of in nowhere land, and we felt a little lost. And but what was great is that shortly after, so I published that article on Mirror, kind of also as a way to sort of kind of a proof of concept that, you know, you can write a paper and you can actually mint it as an NFT, you know, because on Mirror you have the option to both publish. You can simply publish digitally like you do on
right,
medium.com,
right.
but with Mirror you have that option to also mint it if you want to. Yeah, so you know, we were playing with that, and that, you know, that led to a lot of other several other projects that were still, you know, still incubating. Um, but what was great is that by ETH Denver in February, um, there started to be this huge conversation about
Yes.
decentralized science, and there started even to be this hashtag about DeSci. So all of a sudden, you know, we were in the middle of this big ecosystem that's just been blossoming and mushrooming. It's just been it's been wonderfully crazy for the last year. And I
Yeah.
have to say, since ETH Denver back in February, the ecosystem has just, you know, boom, exploded. So, and in fact, now I believe, so sometimes we're categorized as a space DAO, um, but now we're no longer alone by any stretch. There are, I think at the last count, there are like 5 other space DAOs now. So
Incredible. Yeah, the whole term DeSci was something really new to me as well. And then through Refi DAO and through the process of applying for a Gitcoin grant, I got connected to a lot of wonderful women in the space. And yeah, this term DeSci came up. And we recently also hosted Ariella Kohler, who is the founder of Web3 Women in Science. And so, yeah, this concept, and I think that it's really interesting that a lot of us have kind of come around to the thinking about Web3 as being a way to gather our community and to fund the projects that we want to see come to life in the world. And so I think it's really cool that, we're now applying this to, scientific research and, exploring new innovations in science that are going to help us. So it's really cool. And I love just learning and geeking out on these topics because I really don't know that much about them, minus the Web3 conversation. So yeah, I mean, so you on your site, you talk a lot about energy, having an energy future and energy justice. How does what you're doing apply to that theme?
yeah, no, that's a great question, and I'm glad you referenced women in Web3 and science, because they I saw a few of them in our Discord service, like back in December, January, and then they started that Telegram group. And I thought, oh, this is great. This is another way that I can connect with other people in this space. So we've all been in that Telegram group since like March. I mean, pretty, like a good amount of time now. And then they launched their Discord server. So, again, it's so nice. It's just blossoming. It's just, really mushrooming, really. And we're all finding community and people that we can bounce things off of and stuff like that. So, but to your question, you know, I want to start with this, because do you want to own a piece of the future?
Do I want to own a piece of the future? Not necessarily own it. I'd like to ensure that my nieces have, a good future ahead of them and that they can, have an abundant amount of nature around them and clean air and water and, enjoy, beauty in nature and be healthy.
Yeah, exactly, exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. So that's really fundamentally what we are proposing with Frontier DAO. So we are incubating different technologies, but fundamentally, in the core of our DNA, we're after the holy grail of fusion energy.
Mm.
And the fusion energy, in fact, I was given, and you and I met through Gitcoin, through the GR15, which is so great. I mean, that has been it's been such a blessing for me. I've just loved that. The people I've met through that have just, like yourself, have just been so top notch and so dedicated to things like public good and sharing Web3 tooling knowledge with, broad communities. And so first off the bat, it's really important, that 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 the fusion industry starts to communicate more clearly and more effectively. In fact, I was just given a grant to try to further this communication um, avenue, because nuclear fusion is often mistaken for nuclear fission.
Oh,
And nuclear fission
it's
is
like
what,
one letter difference, of course.
I know exactly. It's a one is an I and one is a U. And yet the technologies are completely and fundamentally different. In fact, people in the fusion industry say nuclear fission, which is what we know of with nuclear reactors and Fukushima and those kinds of things, is the opposite. It's the
Oh,
opposite of nuclear fusion. And
oh.
so the easiest way to think about nuclear fusion is that we're using the energy of a star, of the sun, of stars. And so when we're talking about building what they call a tokamak, which is what a nuclear fusion reactor is called, it's a tokamak. It's a certain engineering design, kind of in the shape of a donut, actually.
Mm,
We are talking about building a star on Earth.
wow.
Yeah, we're talking about building a star on Earth, and I'm quoting there Paige Donner, who's the head of Eurofusion, brilliant, super brilliant man, dedicated to fusion for the last 20 years. So basically, when we think of nuclear fusion, what we need to think of is that it's going to unlock clean, abundant, cheap energy for the entire planet. Clean, abundant, cheap energy for the entire planet with minuscule radioactive waste and no contribution to CO2 emissions. I mean, it truly is like a technology that once we get it to commercial, to a level where it can be commercialized, um, it's going to completely change the whole world is structured. Because I mean just think about it. Like let's just go down an imagination lane for a moment. You're driving in your electric vehicle. You drive up to a pump or to an electric recharge station, and you recharge your vehicle and you pay like maybe 10 cents or 5 cents, right? um, that electric charging station is not coal fuel fired. It's actually used. It's fueled by nuclear fusion.
Mm,
So your electric charge is not contributing to any CO2 emissions.
mm,
Um, think for a second too. Maybe you're in rural India, or in a very rural area of Africa, or maybe maybe in the outskirts of Canada, like in the northern lands or something, where there's no access to easily to energy as we know it now. Some of the technology that they're developing right now for nuclear fusion is to actually have smaller self-contained reactors. I mean, some now are even as small as like about this size, so that they can be easily deployed. And so some of the technology that they're working on right now is that a nuclear fusion reactor of about this size, or maybe the size of a
so
you know
smaller than like smaller than a generator.
Exactly. Smaller than a generator could be deployed in all decentrally, all over all over the planet, and then that small generator could actually provide enough energy for, say, a community of about 10,000 homes.
Mm. Now, but so when you say like building a star on Earth, now as beautiful as that image is in my mind, I also know the power of a star, the heat of a star, and you know, is there any danger in these technologies? I mean, could it, lead to, a big blow up or anything if something happened to the machine? I mean, what are the yeah, and also like, what are the challenges with the technology right now? Why hasn't it been adopted or accelerated to the point of use right yet?
No, really good, really smart questions. In terms of safety and regulation, the experts say that sorry, my little dog is
Oh, bring
yeah,
him in.
sorry.
Yeah.
She's gonna pull the plug out there for a second. Sorry about that. Um, so the experts say that of course there are things in terms of safety that we have to pay attention to, um, but it's not the same as what we know of, say, from Chernobyl or things like that, because there's no radioactive waste. So there's other concerns, and right now they're trying to build a regulatory framework. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, they had a big conference in the UK, Fusion 22, and a lot of people from some of the top fusion energy startups came together. Also, the UK Atomic Energy Authority, people from Department of Energy in the United States. They were all there, and they were all talking. And regulatory framework and safety and that kind of stuff was a main topic. So as the technology gets closer to being commercially deployable, those kinds of things will be worked out, to your and addressed, because obviously, because it won't say, like, we could safely say that until those issues are completely addressed, it won't be commercially deployable, right?
Mm.
Yeah, they just wouldn't do it because there'd be too much risk. Um, but to your other point, why hasn't there been more funding for this? It's a very good question, and very interestingly, to date, there has been $4.7 billion infused in the private startup fusion companies. Um, Up until 12 months ago, that number was $2 billion. In the
Oh.
last 12 months, there has been an additional $2.7 billion invested
Mm-hmm.
in fusion energy into the private startups. Here in France, interestingly, because that's excluding any government labs, um, fusion energy has been the domain primarily of government labs and government research. Here in France, down near Aix-en-Provence, down in the south of France, there's a very big, it's a very big tokamak, actually. It's huge. It's the size of a
Oh.
football field.
And this is something
Um,
that looks like a spear.
yes, exactly. Yeah. And it's called iter.org. So when people say it, they say ITER, but
Okay.
it's spelled iter.org. And it's pretty phenomenal because it's a consortium of governments, and so it's all the EU countries, and then it's also the United States, it's China, it's India, it's Russia, it's Canada, it's Australia. So it's a consortium of about 27 countries who have been building this big nuclear fusion reactor since Reagan and Gorbachev decided to get the ball rolling. They actually started construction. The actual construction start date was back in 2010, and they
Mm.
think that they'll be done by about 2025. But now the private funding that's starting to pour into nuclear fusion is thinking that they may actually beat ITER now in terms of getting commercially deployable.
Oh.
But the reason why, Sandra, the reason why I started off this whole monologue, pardon me, I can just go on and on,
No,
just
I love it. It's fascinating.
with the question of, do you want to own a piece of the future, is because as a DAO, that was our fundamental question. Where if we assume that, say, within 10 years or 10 years, let's just say 10 years, fusion energy is commercially deployable, and you have these little generators that can be mass produced and sent to all areas of the globe, then what that means is that's going to unlock a multi-trillion dollars, some estimates are $40 trillion market. So our fundamental question is, why should only one why should only a handful of companies or a handful of governments have the dominion over this new technology that could really unleash complete abundance? And another point is that all the tech, and this point is not mine, this point was made at the conference Fusion 22 in the UK 2 weeks ago, is that all the technology development right now is being done in the northern hemisphere.
Mm.
Every fusion startup company is now in the northern hemisphere, except for one, which is in Australia. But otherwise, it's all being done in the northern hemisphere. So why not address this fundamental question of energy justice now? Like, why don't we start thinking about this now? And that's why we feel as a DAO, okay, so we're still bootstrapping and we're still trying to, communicate about all these things. But this summer, both Alphabet, which of course is the parent company for Google, and Chevron, in July, they each put $100 million into a fusion energy startup called TAE. And
Mm.
TAE has some very promising technology, and they've been working with the Lawrence Livermore Lab and the National Ignition Facility, which are pretty much at the cutting edge of fusion technology. So they each put $100 million into TAE. So they're betting big, right? But now think about DAOs for a second. I mean, you're completely in Web3, right? So I'm sure I'm not telling you anything new when I point out that MakerDAO, right? One of the biggest DAOs and oldest DAOs, and they of course have the creator of DAI, the stablecoin DAI. They just bought a bank for $100 million.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Wow. Wow.
MakerDAO just bought a bank for $100 million. And so how we feel is that if we communicate effectively and do our job as a DAO in terms of outreach and communicating about these concepts of the promise of fusion energy and also the premise of energy justice, why can't we as a DAO reach out to people all over the globe, right? All over the globe, not just the northern hemisphere, but all over the globe, and have the members collectively um, basically collectively join in and make that kind of an investment ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's what I mean about owning a piece of the future. So even if say a member comes to the DAO and says, I can only contribute my time, but then they will earn reputation and points. Or maybe other people come in and they say, well, I want to join at an advocate level. I've got, say five grand to join. Then that builds the treasury, right? It builds the treasury. And then we as a collective can go to some of the more promising fusion energy startups, and we can go, okay, no, we're not Google, we're not Chevron, we're just a little DAO, but here we can support you in your research towards um, uh, commercial commercially deploying, and we'll take an equity stake, obviously, right? Because then we're now acting as we're acting as an equity investor. And
Mm-hmm.
what that means is that everybody in the DAO will have a piece of that future.
Mm.
So if you think for a second, if let's back up 15 years, say it's 2007, right? Or let's back up 17 years, it's 2005. What if there had been a DAO that had formed and with say 1,000 members or 5,000 members or 1,000,000 members had collectively invested in Facebook in 2005? That DAO's treasury right now would be pretty significant,
Mm-hmm.
right? And because of how DAOs are structured, everybody gets to share. Everybody gets to share in the benefits. So it's not just one CEO who's reaping all the benefits, or it's not just one government who has 100% control over energy resources.
Mm.
It's a collective.
Yeah, I can see how, yeah, definitely. I think that's the concept behind a lot of Web3 projects is to democratize the funding aspect and to be able to invest in the things that we want. For example, in Tulum, one of the big issues here is water, because we just don't really know how clean the water is, unfortunately. And, there's just issues with the infrastructure and also corruption. And so, yeah, one of the big initiatives for the Tulum coin and Tulum Coin DAO is to be able to have, a clean source of water. So even, as much as like, building a water treatment plant with some of the funds. So, yeah, I love that. And I love the idea of being able to democratize the investment, but then also the winnings at the end, if it does turn into, a huge success, and is a lucrative endeavor in terms of establishing all of these decentralized energy hubs around the world. And obviously now energy is such a huge and concerning issue for a lot of us around the world, and to be able to take back that control. I see what you mean now about like owning the future versus having governments, or versus us owning the future, right? Like that makes sense. So yeah, I love what you're doing. So you really think it's going to be 10 years before the technology is commercially viable?
Well, having listened to the conference, and some of the biggest, like Helion spoke, Commonwealth spoke, the UK Energy Authority spoke, Eurofusion spoke. They're all saying they're all saying 10 years. Some are saying longer. Um, but also too, I think what some are taking into account, maybe less of the government side of things, is how AI and machine learning.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
When Musk unveiled on his AI day just a couple, a few weeks ago or last month, he unveiled his big dojo, right? Dojo, which is like this like the most powerful AI supercomputer, on the planet. And so basically what they're saying is like that, with any computational um, research, that that is really what's going to accelerate things. And so if that is the case, I'm not saying that the fusion energy is going to use Musk's dojo, but what I'm saying is that that computational power is now within our reach, and it's within the reach of startups. So a startup who's trying to do this breakthrough kind of technology could take some of their investment funds and invest in that, or rent that. And so that's going to speed up, what would take one scientist, or even a coalition of scientists, 100 working in a room even 20 years ago, years to figure out. Now you just run it through AI, and boom, it spits it out on the other side within sometimes within a few minutes, or a few days. So
Yeah, it seems like the power of the community that you're gathering in Web3, and getting all of these like big brains in sort of a room together to accelerate the science, plus bringing the funding to it to further accelerate and invest in the technology. Then the AI on top, yeah, it feels like it could definitely be much faster time to market with all of those forces together, combined together.
Yeah, well said. Really, really well said, Sandra. And to your point about water, so I'm so glad you brought up water, because I mean that can really be an issue. And in fact, I watched a documentary recently about where there are some parts in South America now where water is no longer a public good, where people actually have to pay for their use of water. Um, and that could be the future. That could be the future, right? I mean, we have to recognize, having lived in Southern California for a long time in a past life,
Mhm.
water is a huge issue. What the two things I wanted to say to that was that I'm glad you brought up water, because air is usually considered a public good, right? And so we're kind of trying to say, let's have energy as a public good as well.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is that fusion energy, because right now desalination plants are so energy intensive that they haven't really been able to make it kind of I mean, there are some desalination plants in Southern California, right? But the energy input is so intense that the water that it cleans and then spits out as potable water, it's not it just doesn't make sense. Like it's not cost effective.
Mm.
But if you use a renewable energy like fusion, super cheap energy like fusion, it would cost cents to desalinate. So fusion energy could also actually speak to this global and urgent need for clean water in communities.
Amazing. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. What like with regards to Frontier DAO, what are some of the milestones that you're like hoping to hit, and tell us a little bit about your roadmap?
Yeah, okay, good question. Yeah, good question. Well, we've organized in a in a pod structure. So, think of I'm part of a DAO club, and so we kind of think of different strategies. And yeah, it's good. It's good because as a DAO builder, sometimes you can just be siloed and kind of on your own. But so it's a group of us, and so one of the team leaders, said from the get go, okay, you're not a big ship going through the water. You're an armada of smaller,
Little
fighter ships.
books.
Exactly. Yeah. So we kind of adopted that from the beginning as well. And so we've organized around projects. So right now, um, the most the long-term vision is to have a million or more members in the DAO who all believe in fusion energy. Some of them are going to be core contributors, right? And some of them are just going to be people who believe in this vision of fusion energy, and they've bought a membership, at whichever tier is the most comfortable for them, and they're kind of banking on in 10 years fusion energy is going to be is going to be commercially deployed and viable. So if we can have 1 million members, if we can have even 10 million members, in our philosophy, the more the better, because the more people who own this piece of clean, abundant energy future, the better, and the quicker it's going to come around. Then the quicker it's going to materialize, because one of the only hindrances has been the lack of funding in private fusion energy startups. But so the short term though is we've got several projects. We've got Frontier Registry, which is a scientific publishing platform, and that's been with us from the beginning, because how we always felt is that what we want to do is incubate other people who want to come with their technologies or their startup ideas. We want to give them access to funding, mentors. We want to give them a support system so that they can take their concept and get it to at least a proof of concept, if not then a prototype as well. And then that will get them ready to go after bigger funding, whether it's government funding or private, institutional money. So we want to be that bridge between ideation and no man's land, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, and so because of that, we want to make sure everybody's IP is protected, because a lot of times I think researchers come with their brilliant ideas, and then they sort of throw it into this big black hole, and either it gets lost or it gets ignored, or maybe somebody else gets hold of it. So so Frontier Registry is a way for people to mint their intellectual property, so that
Mm.
there's an immutable log of exactly what it is they were putting forward.
And does that have any like legal substance to it as well, like in regards to future research or trademark copyright. I don't know how it's not necessarily how it works in science, in the sciences with regards to that IP. Would that be like defensible enough if you've got your research paper minted on the blockchain, that nobody else could come and steal it or claim it as their own?
I mean, that's a very insightful question, Sandra. I really appreciate you asking that. I don't think that has been I don't think it's been argued in court yet. I mean, there was that famous case in like this past summer or maybe late spring about the person who used a Hermes bag and they minted something in metaverse like as a digital asset for Hermes, and Hermes took them to court saying, look, you can't use our design. And but that was kind of like the first case of that, like that kind of approximates that. But I would say that yes, it would be defensible because copyright law, I mean, I'm not a lawyer and it hasn't been argued in court yet. So let's see where it goes. But fundamentally, copyright law says that as soon as you create something, you own copyright to it. And
Mm,
so what is minting? It's creating. And it's creating digitally in an indelible way, right? So that nobody else can say, hey, wait a minute, I created that first, because digitally you can kind of mess with dates sometimes, right? Like all you got to do is log in, So, but not on the blockchain. On the blockchain, it's on Etherscan as soon as and you can't change it, right?
right.
So, and copyright law as it stands right now is that as soon as you create, at least in the United States, as soon as you create something, you own copyright to that.
Mm,
So I would venture to guess. I would lean more in the direction that yes, it will be defensible.
right.
Um, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so Frontier Registry. So we've got a little bit of grant money from Polygon, and we're looking to go forward with that. And then and now we're doing this communication campaign on fusion energy and energy justice.
The fusion versus fission education campaign. Yeah, I mean, I had no idea that there was a difference, or I probably have used the two terms interchangeably, without having a clue.
And most of us do. Most of us do. You're not alone. You're with the 99.9% of the rest of the world, and that's probably a large part as to why people don't support fusion, because they fundamentally they just lump it all together with, yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So and thankfully, I really bent the ear of Filecoin Foundation when they were here at ETHCC this summer here in Paris, and I was like, we're having such a hard time communicating because there's this fundamental basically knowledge blackout, right? You would think that the fusion industry would even be much better at communicating about this. And so they gave I've got this grant from them, and they're another association called Unfinished, and they all do really great work in terms of open source knowledge and public goods. And so yeah, so that's starting right now. So I hope that you and your community will want to attend some of the workshops. It's basically weekly, starting this coming week. It's weekly on Thursdays for an hour on Zoom. We'll have different
Amazing.
presenters. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And it's free. It's a weekly educational sessions for people that want to learn about fusion energy.
People who want to learn about decentralized science
Yes.
and fusion energy, and how the one is going to help the other create energy justice on this planet.
Amazing. That's awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely be sharing it with the women in the group. I think that there's definitely a lot of people that would be interested attending and learning all about what you're doing.
Cool, cool. Well, so sometimes I think, how like there's that coalition, like Women for the Planet or Women for Climate. sometimes I almost feel like it may be up to us to really push this forward for fusion energy as well, because I don't know. I mean, I can't. I don't know. I don't want to sound sexist from the from the other point of view, but like sometimes I almost feel like women have this deep connection to the planet, to planet Earth. Men do too, obviously. So
Yeah.
I'm not trying to exclude men,
But
but
it's true, the language is very different. I mean, that's exactly why we started More Women in Crypto. It's not necessarily, anything, we love our male allies and love their support. But at the same time, we really wanted to have a container for ourselves so we could break down these complex topics in ways that were digestible for all of us versus, a lot of times when I first got into the space, it's like, the language people are using or, was just like a bit. I mean, I tried to go there even, like LFG friends, wag me, like whatever, it's just like all of these acronyms and the whole degen culture was a bit like off-putting to me as well. So it was really like, yeah, no, I don't think there's, and I hope that people understand that, that there's a difference between the way that we learn, the way that we, create community with each other. And, sometimes it's just nice to have those spaces for us where, we can say like, I don't have a clue and I don't know what the fuck that person just said. Like, help me, and just like, and be in that safe place with each other, where we don't have to, feel the intimidation of, a very knowledgeable crowd that's going to be like, what, you don't know, like what quadratic funding is, just kidding.
yeah, no, exactly, exactly. Yeah, and I love that I really love that you just said that, Sandra, because I think too, it's like if we're going to be bringing in, if we're going to be bringing like all these other people into Web3, if we're going to onboard the next billion people, right? We really do have to meet them where they are, right? I mean, if they're an engineer at NASA, I remember I was on one of the chat rooms on AIAA, which is the American International Association of Aeronautics. And I was trying to talk about NFTs, right? This was last year, and one of the guys came back to me and said, I am a rocket scientist, and NFT means non um, non-file transfer. So can you please tell me what NFT means? And I was like, thank you so much. You are so precious. I'm so glad. Thank you for your wisdom and your humility. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Mhm.
But not everyone's going to feel comfortable, saying that. I mean, he's a rocket scientist, so he doesn't have to defend his intellectual capability. But yeah, no, for sure, we have to meet people where they are. Absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely. Um, well, Paige, is there anything else that you would like to share while I have you? I also want to be conscious of time. I know it's late for you out there in Paris, but any parting thoughts or words of wisdom that you would like to share with the other community?
No, thank you, Sandra. Yeah, I appreciate you uh taking time on a nice Saturday
On
to
a Saturday.
yeah, no, and it's been so great to connect with you. Like we've both said, that the biggest gift from GR15 from the Gitcoin grant round was connecting with people, like-minded people such as yourself. Well, I guess I have one just very last shout out is that we are putting together another one of the projects from the DAO in partnership with two other scientist ladies, that we're compiling a directory of women in DeSci. So it's a directory of women who want to. It's just basically a reference book that will list their names, their Twitter, what they're specialized in, why they're in DeSci, and that's mainly so that event organize. Sorry, my talk just. So that event organizers, media, people who want to reach out and learn more about DeSci, especially in these specialized fields. Um, Sorry, my dog is gonna pull the computer off the. we'll have a ready directory so that they can go, oh, okay, this person is specialized, in neuroscience. Let's call her up because we need a quote for Forbes magazine right now because we're trying to figure out what DeSci is.
Mm,
So that's what we're doing, because we recognize that it was starting to be that some of these new DeSci events, we're not actually including women on the panels and things like that. And there's such a rich resource of women in science and engineering. So we wanted to make sure that we are part of this conversation.
yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely, yes, and that's also, part of our vision as well with more women in crypto is to bring more visibility to women because you can't be what you don't see, and that's something that I think is like very near and dear to a lot of us, and me being a Latina and coming up in Silicon Valley, there weren't a lot of examples of Latinas in executive offices, so it's really important, I think, to continue to highlight women's voices and yeah, and men's voices that are doing well, doing good on the planet as well. But yeah, that's what we're about. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna just
Wait, tell me a little bit again. I mean, I'll let you go. I promise I
no,
won't
no,
keep
no. I was just gonna
more than a minute. But what is your I knew you have an executive background from Silicon Valley, that you had sort of stepped away from fairly recently, but what is your background? Like,
my background is in tech marketing. So I've always been chasing like the latest emerging technologies. I kind of am attracted to shiny balls. So, but it's, yeah. And, it being in Silicon Valley, working with a lot of different startups and a lot of different technologies. More recently, I've started working on the corporate side and with corporate innovation teams. And now, of course, pursuing, a number of initiatives in Web3 and on the ground, and really, finding that for us, it's like the magic of the IRL plus digital, and what kind of new worlds, economies can we create from this new medium that's now available to us, and how do we be the change that we want to see in the world. It's a big part of why I'm here, what I'm doing. So yeah.
yeah, no, it's wonderful. It's wonderful, the community that you've grown. And yeah, it's not easy being a woman at an executive level in tech. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of wisdom that you could share from your climb there. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's funny is that you think that you get to a certain point and you're not going to confront that anymore. But, now I just moved to Mexico, and guess what? It is still, not quite as advanced in terms of, having, women in executive roles, or even, I felt the sexism from other counterparts, like actually more heavily in just like very surprising way, that it was like, what? Um, so yeah, we know it's, I think it's just, unfortunately it's a challenge we have to continue to overcome, but there's a lot of us, we're strong, we're united, collaborative, and yeah, I like to say fierce. So just got to keep on, and not to say that there's not supportive men out there. My partner is very supportive, and excited to actually see me pushing our ideas forward, or making new connections, or having me speak about what we're doing. So yeah, but yeah, it's an interesting world we live in. I'm excited about the power of Web3. And even though it's a bear market, and where a lot of people have been crushed by crypto prices, but we still believe. So, and we still believe that it's early. And I think that's part of what we're exploring with DAOs and with these communities and experimentation of these new technologies. So it's exciting. And I love what you're doing at Frontier DAO. I'm excited to learn more, maybe come to some of these sessions that you're going to be holding on Thursdays. What time on Thursdays are they going to be?
That would be lovely. Yeah, no, most of them are at 1 p.m. Eastern time.
Okay.
But then a couple of them are, but the schedule is up on the, I'll send you, the schedule is actually pinned to our Twitter at Frontier DAO. And then, but I'll send you the link as well. So a couple of them are at 12 p.m. Eastern time. And then we're not going to do Thanksgiving, the U.S. Thanksgiving. That we'll take a break then. And yeah.
It. Well, thank you so much. It's been so lovely meeting with you and
Lovely.
learning more about Frontier DAO. And I'm looking forward to more conversations in the future and potential collabs, and
Yeah.
yeah, just kind of staying in touch with what we're doing and how we can help each other. So thank you so
Yeah,
much.
it's always such a genuine gift to meet a very intelligent, sensitive woman like yourself, especially one who's working in Web3. So thank you so much, Sandra. Really appreciate this.
Thank you.